Take it away, Tony.
Great. David, thank you so very much for the opportunity. I really, really appreciate you reaching out and inviting me to participate. I certainly have a passion for this group. Irma is a friend and colleague of mine. I've presented to this group. I don't know, maybe it was 2 or 3 years ago, Cindy. I can't remember now. Time flies.
I think it was 2.
Was it 2 years ago? So really, I'm totally honored to have been invited back. Becky, can you make me a co-host so I can share my screen? Please. I should have said that when we first started. And David, thank you for that introduction.
You're welcome.
It's always so embarrassing, right, when people talk about you.
Better than talking about yourself.
I know, right? I guess so. So again, thank you so much for inviting me. I'm going to jump right in here with board recruitment and development, turning passion into action, right? Because passion alone does not get the job done. I took a little bit of a twist on today's curriculum. We're going to talk about board recruitment and retention. But I also know through my own experience and continued conversations with development professionals around the country that board engagement and fundraising is always a challenge. So the latter part of this presentation really takes a deep dive in how do we, once we have our board members, now how do we motivate them and get them involved in the fundraising process? So that's a little added value part of the conversation that we'll have today. So again, this is me. I'm, again, honored to be your presenter today. And like David said, I serve as the National Director for the Sanford Institute of Philanthropy. And over the last few months, I've been serving as the Interim Operations Director for all 3 of our Sanford programs. But all of this happened because of me starting Mr. Nonprofit Consultancy. Believe it or not, David, 10 years ago, this November. So it's really remarkable that 10 years has passed. And I've been successful because of the great support of many nonprofits in the area. So a lot of the work that I do now with the Institute of Philanthropy is focused nationally. National University is based in San Diego. So up until the pandemic, I was traveling every other week out to San Diego. So it's just, again, I'm grateful to have this opportunity to connect and do something in my own backyard. So again, I'm just grateful beyond words for the invitation. So I always like to start with a little bit of an icebreaker. So you could, it's not a huge group, but if we could put it in chat however you want to. But I'm really curious, what is something new that you have learned this year? Cindy's like, where do I start?
Okay. I'll start with Zoom, because I had never heard of that before this year. Definitely more technology than I've ever learned, because I never wanted to deal with it. And I would say, Julie, help me. So I would say technology, Zoom, I think, and also I do realize that as far as distractions, I seem to do better working at home because I have much less distractions and I think I'm more productive. So that's what I think I learned.
Yeah, the only thing about that, me too, Cindy, the challenge there is making sure that you're taking time for your self-care. Because yes. I know it's so easy for me, and I've had it happen day after day after day as I sit here on Zoom meeting after Zoom meeting and doing emails, and next thing I know, my butt's been in this chair for like 7 straight hours.
Oh, I know that. I was talking to my team about that, and like there are days where I'm just sitting here and like I literally forget to eat lunch.
Right,
because
me too.
It just goes into the next thing and the next thing. So you are right about that. And the other thing, I do miss socializing though. Which, I used to complain that we had so many events, and I complained I'm evented out. Now I'm like unevented out.
Right, exactly. Well, thanks for sharing that. Anybody else? So let's see. Nicole said better prioritization. Let's see. Jacqueline, the benefit of virtual presentations. Julie said better time management. So these are all great things that people have learned. What else, David?
One of the things I'll say is it actually provided me the opportunity to build a new community engagement committee from not only some board members, but also community members. So that's something we didn't have before, which has really started to enhance both our messaging as well as what we're doing as far as fundraising. They're really looking at it from a different perspective. So that's
Excellent.
been super helpful.
Wait,
And-
can I ask you one question, David? What is the
Mhm.
purpose of the Community Engagement Committee?
So-
That sounds interesting.
So community engagement for us is they literally are looking at our messaging, how we communicate, where we communicate. They're also looking at, reviewing our different fundraising events and saying, is this working for us? What would work better? One of the first things that they did is they recognized that we don't have a strong donor base. So one of the things that they encouraged us to do was look into a peer-to-peer fundraising platform online that could really help build our web of influence out there in the community. So in June, we actually were accepted into the Global Giving Accelerator program. And in that program, you have like 20 days to get at least 60 new individual donors and raise at least $5,000. We not only hit that goal, we ended up in those 3 weeks raising over $9,000, something we've never done before. But what it really encourages is getting individuals to become fundraisers for you and really working their connections to make those kind of donations and really build the people who are following you.
David, I'm really glad that you shared that, because so many fundraisers, and we're all experiencing this very differently, right? So I'm not trying to minimize the fact that some fundraisers feel this way, but they really do feel like the earth has stopped spinning. And so I think what you just shared with us is a real testament to the fact that it hasn't stopped spinning. And there are still opportunities to be had and to be found, even in this new landscape.
I just want to welcome Whitney. Whitney, we'll do introductions after Tony finishes because there was a
Okay.
mix-up on time for today.
No problem.
Great, so let's see what else we have. So can do much from home, including volunteer to help stop evictions. That's another great example of how we can be advocates for causes that we're passionate about, even though we still may be quarantined in our homes. So these are all really, really great. So thank you for sharing that. It's just, especially in the morning, it's just a good way to just kind of get the energy moving and get folks to feel comfortable interacting during the session. So thanks for participating in that. Okay, so the outline for today, and I'm always moving little boxes around all over my screen. Let's see here. So the outline today is we're going to talk about what makes a strong board, how to establish expectations from the beginning, and techniques for board engagement and fundraising. So like I said, I took a little bit of liberty here, just kind of recognizing that board engagement and fundraising is a challenge that a lot of organizations have. So after we talk about the what makes a strong board, kind of recruitment, retention, we'll take a dive into how you can encourage and get your board members participating in your fundraising strategies. At the Institute of Philanthropy, and today I'm really wearing that hat, the Institute of Philanthropy hat, because we have great curriculum for this. But what our entire curriculum is centered around what we call cause selling and relationship-driven fundraising. And this is the cycle that we recommend for fundraising. And this cycle can also be utilized for board recruitment. So if we're looking at engaging a fundraiser or a board member, these 8 steps are really critical, at least in my experience, in helping you get the type of outcomes that you're looking for. So imagine it, right? Fundraiser or board member. You start with prospecting. That's your list of potential board members, your pre-approach. Now you're taking a deep dive into trying to find out more about this list of prospects, right? So that's your pre-approach. Then your approach is you've learned what you can about the individual. Now you're reaching out to them and setting up that meeting. So you can get together via Zoom, on a phone call, whatever your comfort level is in today's landscape. So you're prospecting, your approach, now you've set up that meeting, now you're in the meeting, and this is your need discovery phase. So this is the phase where you're really getting to know them, getting to understand their passions, and whether or not they are going to align effectively and appropriately with your organization. Then from that, you step into the presentation stage. So now you're presenting them with the opportunity, why it's valuable to your organization, why their participation as a board member or funder would be valuable to them, what need of theirs are you meeting in this whole process, handling objections. This is where, you know, they may say, well, you know, now's not a good time, or I don't have money right now, or come back to me 6 months from now, or they may say, I don't really understand your mission, or how does your mission differentiate from other equine organizations or other food banks? This, in my opinion, step 6 of this cycle is a very exciting step, because if someone is objecting, they're interested, right? They haven't shut you down. They're still interested in having a conversation. So in this part, and I could always come back and do a presentation on handling objections, but that part of our curriculum really teaches you just arms wide open when it comes to objections, and really embracing them and seeing them as a really critical tool and moving either your potential board member or your potential donor to the next step. Then once you've taken care of all of the objections, or some of them, then you make the ask. Will you join our board? Will you commit to our organization and invest in either time, talent, or treasure? And really, as a board member, you may be asking them to invest in all 3, depending on how your nonprofit is structured. If you have a give-get policy, then you really are recruiting board members to give time, talent, and treasure. So you make the ask, you get them in, and then step 8 is the stewardship, right? Now that we have folks in, they're engaged, we want to make sure we're thanking them consistently. We're letting them know how their time, talent, and treasure is impacting the organization, so that they continue to stay involved, continue to stay passionate, and continue to provide you with treasure. What I love about the cause selling approach, as opposed to traditional fundraising, or again, in board development, just kind of traditional recruitment, is that traditional model of asking, we would typically spend so much of our time just closing long and hard, trying to get individuals to commit to our organization, individuals that we don't really know. I'm not ashamed to say, 20 years ago, when I started fundraising, I was this guy on the left of your screen doing the traditional model of asking. I would go to a Chamber of Commerce event with about 20 pounds of business cards in every pocket I could fit them in, and would walk up to every single person standing or sitting or lying down, and walk up to them and put my card in their face and say, we're doing great work, don't you want to give us money? We're doing great work, don't you want to give us money? We're doing great work, don't you want to give us money? And really, again, long and hard, asking anyone. So as you can imagine, the results weren't so great, given I was spending probably 40% of my time doing that. So if we really focus on the cause selling, or the relationship model of asking and fundraising, the difference there is we're spending the bulk of our time up front building relationships, getting to know the individuals that we're hoping will support our organization in time, talent, or treasure. So that by the time we're at the point where we're actually asking them to commit, we're spending less time asking folks to commit, because we're asking more of the right people. So, and our ROI is higher because we're asking more of the right people. So I just wanted to share that with you. This particular graph is very enlightening to me, because it really helps you look at the difference between traditional, or what I would often call transactional fundraising, versus relationship-driven fundraising. I forgot to mention, I just noticed in this particular slide deck that I didn't put in a ground rules or house rules deck or slide. And typically what I would say is the only house rule today is that you interrupt me constantly. So if you have a question, please put it in the chat. If I can get some help kind of monitoring the chat, or unmute yourself and ask the question or interject. This is really meant to be conversational. You've taken the time early in the morning to invest in your professional development, and I want you to feel like you're getting a good return on that time.
I'll be monitoring chat.
Great, thank you, David. I appreciate that. And really, just jump in and say, "Hey, Tony, we've got a question," or someone made a comment. I have no ego around any of this. So again, it's all about everybody just feeling good about the experience and learning something. So let's talk a little bit about board recruitment. So I've done a lot of board recruitment work and utilized a lot of different strategies. But basically, it comes down to this. It really is understanding, what does the organization need? But before you can really determine what does the organization need, you need to figure out, what does it already have? So there's a very simple, and you can Google this, it's like a board metrics document that I use. There are all kinds of different samples of them all over the internet. But basically, when I work with clients, I have a board survey that I use to survey the existing board. So it looks at things like gender identity, age, skill sets, passions, connectivity, all of the things about your donor. And about your board member. I have to make sure I'm talking board members, about your board members. So if you have your existing board members go through that process, you get a very clear and vivid picture of what your board is missing, right? When you consolidate that data of what you have, it's very clear what you're missing. So then you can create a persona around what you're missing and know that that's the type of individual that you need to be prospecting and recruiting to serve on your board. The other thing, and this may be kind of 101 for some organizations, for other organizations, you'd be shocked. It's not so 101, despite how long they may have been providing services. But roles and responsibilities documents, right? What is the role of the board member? What is the expectations? Just like an employee, if you want a board member to succeed and thrive in their role, they need to understand what the roles and responsibilities are for them. Otherwise, they're just floundering, not really knowing what the expectation is. Diversity, equity, and inclusion is very important as we are recruiting board members, so just being very mindful of that. Ethics and alignment of ethical beliefs and ethical behaviors is very important when you're looking at bringing on board members. So I encourage you, if you do not already, to take some time to create some type of code of ethics for your organization so that that can be presented to a potential board member as well. Succession planning. Cindy may win the lottery tomorrow and she's going to buy an island in the South Pacific. And so what is the succession planning if Cindy wins the lottery tomorrow, right? And so, and I'm not saying, I'm just picking on Cindy, but this is true of all organizations. We have to be mindful. We got, I was going to say hit pretty hard, but that sounds super dramatic. But we were surprised at Sanford Programs, because of the pandemic, we lost some senior leaders in their refocusing in what was important to them and how they wanted to invest their time, right? So it wasn't dissatisfaction in the job. It was just, we had a director of one of our programs say, I've been quarantined for 2 months now, with my kids. I didn't realize how much I missed my kids. I didn't realize, all of these other things in my life that I was missing. And I think I'm in the position where I don't have to do this full time. I could do something else and still be able to continue, this feeling and connectivity that I'm having with my family, or these other things that I didn't realize I missed so much. We didn't expect that, and we didn't have a succession plan, to fill that director level position internally. So, again, anything can happen. So succession planning in your board helps you prepare for when you need to fill those slots. And then you're also not scrambling, right, to fill that spot. If you're operating with a small board and then all of a sudden you can't have quorum or something, right? Or you're not meeting the minimum based on your bylaws. And then the key too is prospecting, creating that list of potential board members, of course, utilizing the existing talent of your board to help with referrals and to help you with that process. So that's, so these are some of the key ingredients, I think, to board recruitment, successful recruitment, the types of documents and items that I think anyone that's really serious about contributing to your board and not just, fluffing up their resume. These are the kinds of things that someone really vested in that commitment would want to see. Because we have to realize, right, that board members are volunteers. They're volunteers for our organizations, but they are volunteers with the highest level of accountability to the organization. Any questions or comments about that? David, do you want to share anything that you guys might be doing differently at your organization? Or
well, just one of the things, just from our process, one of the things that we do as far as prospecting is we do look at what need we have as far as industries that might not be represented, and try and focus our energies toward bringing in somebody in that area. Recently, because of term limits, our lawyer on the board transitioned off.
okay.
So we were looking for a new lawyer to come on that. Question that I have, and this is something I've experienced in my 25 years or so, would be to ask you, how much really should staff be involved in the recruitment process as opposed to the prospecting being done by board members?
So I think board recruitment is very much like fundraising in that it's a team sport. So I would certainly say, David, that in your role as development officers or community relations, anyone that is outward facing to the public in your organization is connecting and touching, well, not touching these days, but connecting, with a lot of people. So you're going to come across folks that, you're going to say, wow, they seemed really passionate. They fit in, they fill a void in an industry that we don't have. They seemed likable, professional. I'm going to offer them up as a prospect to my executive director, CEO, or board chair. There should definitely be some type of, in my opinion, formal pipeline process for staff to be able to feed prospects up to whoever is managing recruitment for the board. So some boards have, a small committee that is responsible for continuously recruiting and keeping a vibrant pipeline. So that's what I would say the role is, that the role of staff is to feed the prospecting pipeline, and that's it.
Which is what we do, which is great.
Okay,
we do have a question from Maria. Just recently, she was wondering whether it is common for all board members to also be donors. And what about in a hospital setting, such as a hospital board of directors?
Oh, that's a whole nother beast, as far as I'm concerned. So the first part of the question was about board members giving, correct?
Correct.
So it has been a best practice for, I would say, almost a decade at this point, for organizations to have some type of give or get policy with their board members. Because let's just be real. How are we going to ask other people to contribute to our nonprofit, to give of their treasure, when our board members have not given or gotten, that's a terrible way of putting that, when they haven't also contributed to the organization? That doesn't work for all nonprofits. I want to say, everything that I mentioned today, these are not meant to be cookie cutter solutions, right? These are just some best practices that generally work for the larger number of organizations. For some organizations, for whatever reason, these things may not make sense. But I can tell you, for a lot of organizations, give or get has fundamentally kind of not only it's changed the board makeup, but it also has encouraged more giving from new donors because they see the percentage of board members that are actively contributing.
Can I just hop in there real quick, Tony?
Yeah.
Also, one of the things that's looked at more and more is foundations. They
Thank you.
will ask the question, what percentage of your board is giving? So from our standpoint, we don't, even though we have technically a get, we don't put a dollar amount on there. What we encourage our board members to do is do a monthly gift at whatever rate they can. But as long as they give us, $10 or $25 a year, we can count that as 100% for the sake of proposals.
Absolutely. Absolutely. That's a great way to do it. So again, it really just depends on your organization and what best fits within, just the atmosphere and the norms within your culture. The other part of that question was around boards at hospitals. So I have to, I have not had a lot of experience with hospital boards, other than my assumption is that those boards are compensated. But I could be wrong about that. But it's always been my belief that most board members of most hospitals are compensated unless they're working for unless they're serving on the board's foundation. So like the Broward Health Foundation, I would expect that those board members were volunteering. But if they were a board member of Broward Health, my expectation is that they're getting compensated for that board time.
Tony, Cindy has a comment.
Yeah, I just had a couple of comments. First of all, I just wanted to say, as far as the board contributing, I think, and I've gone through a transition over my years at the chamber, but basically where we are now is we feel that if you want to be on the board, you need to have some skin in the game. And we have, done several revamps of our bylaws. Originally, we had changed it. We went too drastic. We said you have to be a trustee member. But then we said, okay, if you're a small business and you've been on a member for 2 years and you've served on a committee, you have to contribute $700 a year towards sponsorship, because we feel like you are the example and you have to have the skin in the game. And the other thing I just wanted to say, as far as prospecting, I think, people who are in a position like I am or you are, David, we have contact with so many people all the time. So we're, the people who know them. And what I do as far as prospecting, everywhere all year long, I am watching people and I observe them. And then I'll say to them, if I think they would be good for the board, hey, when the announcement goes out, why don't you apply? I said, and I'll tell them, I don't make the decision. I just think that you would be great for our board. But prospecting is like an everyday job. I'm always keeping my eyes open. But, if you are the key person, you definitely have more opportunity than your board members to really know the people. And then the other thing I just want to say is when we do our board, we actually kind of look at a rubric and try to make sure, as far as diversity, that we're hitting all the metrics, as far as, Black people, women, and even by the type of business that we put on the board. So we use this rubric to make that decision. So I just wanted to add that.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that, because I think that rubric and using that metrics is really important. It just helps you have better clarity in terms of who you really need on the board. You said something interesting there, Cindy, and I wrote it down. I think what's a little unique about the chambers and your recruitment process is the fact that you actually send out an announcement, right? And, annually or biannually, whatever that looks like, you send out an announcement. Very rarely do I see nonprofits utilizing that kind of strategy where they would publicly, just put it out there, either through an e-blast or on social media that they're looking for a board member. And I would encourage you to, to do that. I mean, again, you've done your homework, you know what you're looking for. So go ahead and put out the request out there and let them know, identify the persona. This is what we're looking for. In that arena, though, I would encourage you to only commit to communicating the skill sets that you're looking for, right? I mean, we certainly don't want to publicly put something out there that says we're looking for women only. You know what I mean? If we're trying to diversify gender or something, right? But there are ways definitely to
Well,
go ahead, I'm sorry.
when we send out the nominate with the information for the nominees, we also put an application attached to it. So they need to complete an application, you know, which will give you their skill set, because you know what, there may be people out there that we don't know, or may have talents that we're not aware of, or fit something in the rubric. So we have an extensive application,
That's
which
great.
gives us all the stuff.
Yeah, that's great. Thanks for sharing that. There was something else that I wanted to say about that, but I can't remember. So maybe I'll remember and I'll come back to it. So I'm going to go ahead and move along. This is, you know, so we talked about, recruitment, and these are just some of, and it'll differ, for your organization, but these are just 10 kind of board responsibilities that I wanted to highlight with everyone today. And there are definitely more, but these are kind of the top 10 kind of responsibilities for board members, right? As board members oversee and determine the mission and purpose of the organization. They select the chief executive should your organization be large enough to have an executive director or CEO. I know that, we're blessed in our community with many grassroots organizations that are doing incredible work. They support and evaluate the chief executive. Keyword evaluate. I know there are, just from my experience, a lot of organizations that don't have a formal evaluation process, not only for the chief executive, but for other levels of staff. And everyone likes to know how they're doing in their job. So anyway, if you don't have some type of evaluation process in place, or if your board doesn't, or if as a leader you don't for your other team members, I would encourage you to do that. They ensure effective planning. And then lastly, they monitor and strengthen programs and services. So that's the last of those top 5.
Big impact on you all. So if it's okay, I'd like to tell you a little about myself, and I'd love to tell you how the Broward County Property Appraiser's Office works with the public to basically make people's lives better. Again, my name's Marty Kerr. I've lived in Broward County my entire life.
If I can ask whoever just came on, if they could please mute their phone.
Lived in Pembroke Pines for a while, then moved to Dade with my.
Thank you.
Thanks, I was just letting that pass. Let's see here. So number 6 is ensure legal and ethical integrity. Again, we're talking about some of the top 10 board responsibilities. Very important. Enhance the organization's public standing. They help build a competent board. Also, they help maintain a competent board through their own behavior. Ensure adequate financial resources, and protect assets and provide proper financial oversight. So those are, and we could probably add 10 more to these. David, I'll be happy also if you want, I can provide you with this deck if, we want to share the deck, afterwards with folks that attended or whomever you'd like to share it with. I'm happy to
Please,
do
that would be wonderful.
Excellent. So again, these are, just some of the top 10 that I would recommend, that you take a look at and make sure at a minimum that your board members understand and can lean into and commit to these responsibilities. But again, hopefully you have some type of board member role and responsibility document that board members commit to on an annual basis at a minimum when they're being recruited, that you could incorporate these into that. So let's talk about board retention, right? So we've done all the right things. We've recruited all the right people. So now we want to keep them, right? It's, we get good people, we get, either on our board, we get good donors, we get, good team members. We want to retain great people. So here's some of the things that we need to do in order to retain our board members. Board members need to feel valued. Like I said, they are volunteers, but they are volunteers with the highest level of accountability to the organization. So we need to do what we can to make them feel valued. And again, I say that that's a team sport. in many ways. So it's not, in my opinion, and again, this varies depending on your organization, your organizational norms. But, you know, in my opinion, board members need to be lifted up like everybody else, especially in these times. They're making, I'm sure, very challenging decisions, and in some cases, decisions we may not agree with. But they need to feel valued. So whatever we can do to elevate them and make them feel valued is a good thing, and certainly helps in retention. Board members need good governance. So your board chair and who is selected as your board chair is critical to the retention of your board members. Just because someone's been on the board for 6 years and is kind of in this track to become board chair, if they don't have the skill sets, the personality, then they shouldn't be board chair. I don't care what kind of track they've been on. If they don't have the skill sets, they shouldn't be the board chair. Board members need to stay connected to the mission. So like David, you're a great example. I mean, for the nonprofits that have, you know, an amazing kind of brick and mortar facility for folks to you know, tap into and see. In today's environment, you know, maybe you want to do a monthly mission moment with your board, and for 30 minutes have the, what's that?
We do.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, for 30 minutes you have them jump on Zoom and you do a mission moment, and maybe you invite, you know, someone that's benefiting from your services to be on there as well, to kind of share, you know, their experiences. But whatever you can do in this environment to keep them connected and passionate to the mission helps with your board retention. Board members need mentoring and support, right? We're talking about turning passion into action, and passion alone isn't enough. And sometimes board members need, like I said, mentoring, they need support. So think about, you know, if you're bringing on someone, a young professional who doesn't have a lot of board experience, then go ahead and you know, connect them with a board member that's been serving a while and have them be a mentor to that new board member. Again, not rocket science, but maybe some things that you haven't done in the past that in this new landscape, maybe you have the time to really think about and execute. Board members need ownership. What are they owning? In what way are they contributing? So again, making sure that that's clearly defined. Right? Is your board member really meant to participate as a thought leader? Are they meant to roll up their sleeves and own certain activities and responsibilities? Again, that depends on your organization, what works best for you. But a good way to retain board members is to make sure that they have some feeling of ownership in something that can ultimately benefit the organization. And then lastly, board members need training. So with a lot of the clients that I've worked with over the years, we actually modified the bylaws to include the fact that a board member would have to attend at least one philanthropic or nonprofit professional development course a year. Because very much like their own industries, right? If I'm a board member on your board, and if my industry is furniture sales, right? If I'm a successful person in that industry, I'm successful because I know what my competitors are doing. I know what's happening in the marketplace. I know, you know, that ottomans are the hot thing right now, and not only are ottomans, but everyone wants a houndstooth ottoman, right? I mean, I know these things because I know the market that my business is in. So the same thing holds true for the nonprofit sector and your board members that are serving on your boards. For them to be the best they can be for your organization, they too need to understand what's happening in the nonprofit sector. What are the challenges? What are the opportunities? What are the trends? So I would really encourage you, if you aren't already, and I'm not saying you have to go so far as to, you know, modify bylaws. In fact, these were mostly upstarts and pretty young nonprofits where we did that. So for nonprofits that have been around for a while, that may be a little bit harder to have a bylaw change. But think about, as you're looking at professional development for your staff or for yourself, also think about what type of professional development you can offer to your board that is very focused on the nonprofit sector. there's so many free, there's so much, so many free resources out there right now that, really you could do a watch party. On our website, on SanfordInstituteOfPhilanthropy.org, we have a whole library of pre-recorded webinars touching on recruitment, retention, the ask, handling objections, trends in philanthropy. And we're not the only ones doing that. So if you find those types of free resources, set up an hour with your board, watch the pre-recorded video together, and then have a discussion afterwards about what did we learn? What did we learn here that we can implement with our organization? Did we just waste our time for an hour? Is this not right for us? And that's okay too, right? But there are tons of opportunities for you to engage with your board, give them professional development that will not impact your bottom line in a negative way. Now, let's have an uncomfortable conversation about the board member that should not be a board member. And if you haven't run into this scenario yet, I'm really happy for you. But at some point, you may run into the scenario. And again, as staff, as executive directors, this really isn't our responsibility. This is the responsibility of other board members, but ultimately your board chair, to have conversations with and to manage board members that are problematic to the success of the organization. So if you have a board member that is creating problems, your board president is the one who should deal with that problem quickly. And common problems that board members may display is low attendance and participation, just consistently argumentative, bullying. There is no room for bullying on nonprofit boards. Rudeness and just a general showing, lack of interest. There is no one-size-fits-all solution to these problems. It might take some sharp and direct confrontation. So, this is just to underscore the fact that we are running businesses. And I appreciate the level of passion that folks bring to a board, but if you can't hone that passion and direct it into appropriate action for the organization, if your passion is unleashed in negative ways, that is not a good fit for that person. Maybe there's somewhere else in the organization where they can contribute. And that's certainly when I have had to deal with these types of situations, I know people ultimately came to the board because they had passion for the cause and they wanted to make a difference. I'm not walking in their shoes. I don't know what could be creating the things that I'm seeing they're displaying these types of personality traits that I didn't know existed in them or they hadn't shown before. So the first thing that I would do is take a look at where else in the organization that can they contribute, add value, and feel good about what they're doing without being as disruptive as they are being on the board of directors. So that's just one thing that I would initially do, right, is try and find somewhere else where their time, talent, or treasure might be able to add value. Your organization's bylaws should include standards of conduct for the board and term limits. Be sure that your organization's policy aligns with state regulations. Some states, have regulations around what that language should look like in your bylaws. I'm pretty sure there is a Florida state statute around this that gives you some specific language. I haven't looked at it in a while, so I didn't reference it because again, I'm not really sure what it looks like these days. But again, what would we do without Google? So you can always Google it and take a look and look at that. You could also organize a board workshop to build morale, fight burnout, and re-engage your board members. I'm a real advocate of having, board workshops. I don't use the term board retreat. I think that's old language. I mean, we're not we're not bellying up to a bar at a sandy resort, right? So, so it really is a board workshop. So, you know, a lot of times these issues can be handled quickly before they escalate to a point where you have, you know, where a board chair would have to have an uncomfortable conversation with someone. A lot of times that can be handled through some type of board workshop and just some realignment, right, of focus and energy. David, any questions or anything that I should address?
No, not right now, but if you do have a question, feel free to raise your hand or unmute yourself and ask Tony.
Excellent, great. I get to a point sometimes where I feel like I've talked too much, so I just want to make sure I'm being mindful of any questions. So that's, you know, that's really kind of what I wanted to talk about in terms of board, you know, recruitment, retention, the uncomfortable conversation about, you know, the fact that, you know, sometimes we have to remove board members from the board for, you know, a number of different reasons. But from what I hear consistently around the country from development officers and from executive directors and CEOs is around the topic of how do I get my board to fundraise, right? They're so uncomfortable, they feel icky about it. It's like, ew, I can't do that. That's why we have a development officer, so I don't have to raise money. What are we paying them for if I have to go raise money? But, you know, fundraising really is a team sport. And if, you know, your board is truly vested in the fiscal health and sustainability of your organization, they too will want to be engaged in some way in your fundraising strategy. So I wanted to talk a little bit about that, right? So everyone can be a good fundraiser. And so just establishing from the start that fundraising is an expected activity of your board members and making it clear to the board that every one of them is capable of participating in some aspect of the fundraising process. And we're going to take a deep dive into that in just a minute. And I am being mindful of my time, David, so we'll have plenty of time. Yeah,
I know you are.
We'll have plenty of time at the end for folks to do introductions and stuff that joined us after we started. So let's see here. And again, it's not all about asking for money. We want money. Money pays the bills, but we also know that there's a lot of value in time and talent. Take away the mystery of fundraising by breaking it down into simple, clear tasks for your board members. Communicate how their work fits into the bigger picture. Teach them the case, right? What's your case study? Why is your organization relevant to the community that you're serving? What are the outcomes, right? Making sure that they understand all of that so that they can be really effective brand ambassadors for your organization. And like I said, you know, when we talked about retention and kind of that upward encouragement, the same thing here is, you know, we manage up, establish your role as their mentor through this process so that they don't feel like they're sitting in the canoe all by themselves trying to figure this out. So I'd love to kind of, initially we're going to do some breakout rooms for this. I don't think we need to do that, and in the interest of time. But I'd love to hear from some of you, you know, what is the biggest barrier your board must overcome to be successful fundraisers? So knowing what you know of your board, what do you think is a barrier for them to be successful in supporting your fundraising initiatives?
That they need to get over the idea that they need to make the ask. That's what they have me for.
Excellent.
Anyone else? Feel free to unmute.
Hey, Becky here.
Hey, Becky.
I think that in terms of anybody like the chamber who's dealing a lot with the business community, right now everyone's faced with the particular challenge of coronavirus. And, you know, like it's something that has kind of devastated the community. So I think those big things that are happening in our world that impact everyone, you know, definitely impact our board's ability to be successful fundraisers, you know?
No, it is. So that's why, so that's where, you know, we have to make these really intentional shifts right now. So if we're not, you know, if we're uncomfortable, and again, it depends on the market, it depends on your organization and what you feel comfortable doing. I can tell you that, you know, I've talked to many fundraisers that over the last 3 months have raised more money in that time period than they did the same time period in 2019. Some professional development offers as much as 35 to 40% more than they were able to raise in 2019. So it really just kind of depends on your market. And certainly in this particular landscape, if you can connect anything that you're doing to some type of COVID relief, you're in a good space. Now, I am not and never will advocate creating programs to chase money. That's not what I'm saying. But if you have a program that naturally benefits individuals in this pandemic, think about how you can elevate the visibility of that. And I'll give you a good example. So I have through the Institute of Philanthropy, we provide monthly professional development workshops to the nonprofit First Tee. So we provide it across the country to all of their fundraisers. And, you know, First Tee is all about golf, right? In the game of golf, and teaching kids certain skills through the game of golf, helping kids have that experience, kids and youth that typically would never get to experience the game of golf, right? And in some areas around the country, it's business as usual. I think it might be here in South Florida, correct me if I'm wrong, but it's business as usual on golf courses, right? The golf courses are open, people can go out there. So First Tee has not been, you know, as negatively impacted. They were initially, like all of us, but now they are not as negatively impacted as many nonprofits in terms of their program delivery, right? Because the golf courses are open. So I told them, I said, if you think creatively about your program, you in fact are providing a service during the pandemic, because for so many parents that are working from home, you're offering respite. If you're taking their youth or child out of the house and onto a golf course for a day, now you're providing respite for that parent for that time period, who, you know, is working from home, might have been homeschooled, you know what I mean? So there are ways to get creative with some of our existing programming if we think of, you know, if we really think about all of the value that it brings. And they were like, gosh, we never thought about the fact that us taking youth to, you know, the golf courses was providing respite, you know, for their parents.
Hey, Tony.
Yeah.
This is Jacqueline.
Hi, Jacqueline.
I just want to add to that. Take it another step and tell your story to the local news media. That way it brings attention. Fundraising is much easier when more people know about it.
Sure.
Especially when they know that you're serving in the community, it makes a huge difference. So people, again, remember at the beginning when we were talking and I was talking about making your business or your organization be more of a neighbor, that's how you show you're a neighbor. Because now you're taking care of the kids, you're helping, you're providing a service for the people in the community. But when you tell that story to the news media, it changes the perception of who you are and what you do. Most people don't even know your nonprofit even exists wherever you're located.
Right.
The only way to let people know in a way, you know, especially when the businesses collaborate, and we have such a great opportunity to do that during this pandemic, it's going to make a huge difference. But you're going to inspire others to do what you're doing. Mm-hmm. Do that through the media. So I just add that. It really makes fundraising a lot easier because people know you're there. They see what you're doing, and then they want to help. They're like, oh, I can help with that. Yep. I'm part of that. And it's an easy, you know.
Yeah, no, thank you for sharing that, Jacqueline. It's absolutely true, right? Anything we can do to elevate our brand awareness. And I'll make the assumption, you know, that folks want good news right now. Folks want to see good news stories, right? And your organizations are doing great work, and none of the organizations on this particular call or anywhere in our community want to be the best kept secret in town. So
Tony,
go ahead, yeah.
One of the other things that, from a board perspective, I think is a huge barrier is just their confidence in talking about the organization. One of the things that we had done in the past was I did a workshop for them, an hour and a half workshop on building your elevator speech.
Mm-hmm.
Now, they all loved it. They all went through the process. They all started to build their speech. But when it comes down to actually practicing that speech
Mm-hmm.
so that you become comfortable with it, I think that's where it falls by the wayside. So how do we, if we are giving them the tools, how do we get them to exercise the tools?
And I think, yeah, so that's great. And I think that this might help, this next piece, and this is the last piece of the presentation, these next few slides. But, so for some folks, maybe we shouldn't say go out and fundraise. Maybe we should give them a very specific role in our fundraising process. So we can look at creating these roles for our board members. So maybe their role in the fundraising process is they're a prospector. Maybe their role is a cultivator. Maybe their role is a solicitor, or maybe their role is a steward. So if we can identify, again, maybe their skill set really lies in the prospector piece of this and not so much the solicitor piece. So they can add a lot of value as a prospector, a cultivator, or a steward, but not necessarily a solicitor. And David, like you said, in your case, you want them to prospect and cultivate, but then ultimately refer that relationship to you so that then you can solicit, right?
Correct.
And then board members can be very actively engaged in the stewardship, right? So I want to talk a little bit about these 4 areas because I think that this really helps for those board members that are like, I can't raise money. Like you're saying, David, regardless of all the tools that you've given me, that I just can't activate this. So if we break it down into these smaller kind of pillars, I think that you'll find probably more engagement and folks will feel a little more successful about their contribution. So just real quickly with the prospectors, so good donors may be good business contacts for securing corporate grants, help identify names of people who may be interested in participating in your organization. These are all of the things that a prospector would do. Prospecting folks that show an interest in your mission or who have shown a philanthropic capacity and interest with other similar organizations. So this is what your prospectors would do, right? Is they would help identify these individuals. And then of course you have to know within your organization where now this prospecting information goes, what does that communication kind of funnel look like so that their great work in prospecting doesn't just sit in some CRM or on some spreadsheet. Then you have cultivators. So these folks can meet with potential donors, engage with the prospect. Maybe a board member as a cultivator wants to host a virtual event. So, pre-COVID, we were doing parlor events where folks would open up their home and invite potential board members in to learn about the organization. Board members can still do that through a virtual event. If you have a board member that wants to do a cultivation event, they can still do that. They would just do it via Zoom. Solicitors. So if you aren't fortunate to have someone in a full-time development role, you may need board members to be solicitors. And then stewards, really important. Stewards thank donors, thank donors, thank donors. Stewards can be grouped and asked to thank donors in their specific community. You could section out your donors, and a certain part of board members connect with, recurring donors. Other board members connect with, donors that are providing major gifts. Other board members support donors somewhere in between. And this, of course, I don't think I need to go into this. You'll have the deck also, but just different ways of stewarding the relationship. We all certainly know that a handwritten note is like gold in these days. There's nothing that feels more special than getting a handwritten note. But there are plenty of other ways that you can steward your board members once they have become part of the board, and also your donors. So really, so just again, just a reflection, and you might want to do this, you know, take note of this and do this later today or sometime next month, schedule some time to just sit down and self-reflect on your board and what you know of them and where your board members might fit in these categories of prospector, cultivator, solicitor, or steward. And you may have board members that fit in 2, 3, or all 4 of these categories. So again, if you have a challenge with getting your board members engaged in the full responsibility of fundraising, then I think inviting them to participate in one of these 4 pillars of fundraising, I think you'll have more success with them and a higher level of engagement. So lastly, just to remind you that nonprofit is a tax status. It is not a business model. And I think it's really important that we recognize that and know that, especially as we talk about roles and responsibilities as critical to our organization as that of a board member. Just wanted to offer this additional resource. If you haven't read this, this is a great read. Maybe you want to invest in buying this book for all of your board members, and maybe you do a little book club around it. But this is just a great book. Start with why. You know, inspire someone every day with everything we say and everything we do. And it all starts with our why. So I would just, you know, I wanted to leave you with at least some other additional resource that might help you along this journey of building a board that is turning passion into appropriate action. So David, that's my presentation for today. I'm happy to answer any questions. And I'm just really, again, so grateful for the opportunity to be with all of you this morning, to connect and be able to do something in my own backyard just means the world to me. And for the nonprofits, I mean, for everyone that's on the call right now, just, you know, major kudos to you for your tenacity and for your success despite the whirlwind of uncertainty that seems to be constantly around us. So major kudos to you.